At 7:26 on a gray Tuesday morning, two black brothers stood beneath the words, "Equal justice under law," while a courthouse security chief ordered one of them against the marble wall. The older officer leaned close and said, "In this building, I decide what the law allows." What he did not know was that one brother had come to investigate men exactly like him, and the other was supposed to take the federal bench in less than 2 hours. The rain had started before dawn. It was not a violent storm, only the slow, steady kind that turned downtown sidewalks dark and polished the stone buildings of Atlanta until they seemed older than the city itself. Adrian Cole watched the rain crawl down the windshield of his rented sedan as he waited for his twin brother to finish a telephone call. At 52, the Cole brothers still looked enough alike to confuse strangers. Both were tall. Both had close-cropped hair with gray beginning at their temples. Both carried the quiet posture their father had taught them years ago in a small house outside Savannah. But people who knew them could tell the difference immediately. Anthony listened before he spoke. Adrian watched before he moved. Those habits had taken them into very different professions. Anthony Cole had spent more than 20 years in the law, first as a public defender, then a federal prosecutor, then a respected appellate attorney whose calm presence had made even impatient judges listen. 3 months earlier, after a long confirmation process, he had received a lifetime appointment to the federal bench. That morning would be his first official day sitting in the Mercer Federal Courthouse. His chambers staff expected him at 8:30. The chief judge planned to introduce him at 9. There would be photographs, speeches, handshakes, and the ceremonial dignity that followed a new federal judge into office. Anthony had spent half the night worrying about none of it. He had been thinking about his mother. "You know she would have called 7 times already," he said as he slipped his phone into his coat pocket. Adrian smiled. "Only 7?" Anthony looked out at the courthouse. Their mother, Lillian Cole, had passed away 18 months earlier. Their father had been gone much longer. Neither parent had lived to see Anthony confirmed, but both brothers knew exactly what their mother would have said that morning. Stand straight. Be kind. And do not let anybody turn a title into an excuse to forget who you are. Anthony reached into the back seat and lifted a small walnut box. Adrian glanced at it. "You brought Dad's cufflinks." Anthony nodded. "I thought I might wear them." Their father had bought the cufflinks at a pawn shop after becoming a school principal in 1978. They were not expensive. One was slightly scratched. The clasp on the other had been repaired twice. Anthony owned better jewelry now. He had never worn any of it on an important day. Adrian smiled faintly. "Good choice." Then Anthony looked at the thick brown leather case resting beside his brother. "You still carrying half the federal government in that thing?" Adrian placed one hand on the case. "Feels like it." Anthony did not ask what was inside. That boundary between them had been established months earlier. Adrian worked as a senior special agent, assigned to a Department of Justice Inspector General task force. For nearly 9 months, his team had been reviewing complaints involving security practices at several federal facilities. Most of the complaints seemed minor when read separately. An elderly veteran detained after asking why his bag had been searched twice. A delivery driver escorted outside after questioning an officer's instructions. A grandmother prevented from attending her son's hearing because a courthouse officer claimed she had been disrespectful. A young attorney temporarily restrained after objecting when confidential files were opened without authorization. Individually, every incident had been explained away. Miscommunication, officer discretion, security concerns, failure to comply. But Adrian had spent his career learning that patterns rarely announced themselves. They hid inside repetition. The same names appeared. The same supervisor signed reports. The same explanations were used. And at the center of more than a dozen complaints was one man, Raymond Voss, Chief Court Security Officer, 23 years of service. no serious disciplinary record, several commendations, and a growing list of complaints that had somehow disappeared into administrative drawers. Adrian's assignment had become more sensitive when Anthony received his judicial appointment. He immediately disclosed the family connection. His supervisors had considered removing him. Instead, because the investigation had begun long before Anthony's nomination, and because Anthony had no role in the investigation, Adrian remained on the task force under strict instructions. He could not discuss the details with his brother. Anthony could not participate in any matter touching the investigation. If a case ever reached his courtroom, he would step aside. The brothers understood. They had spent their entire lives protecting each other. Now, integrity required distance. Anthony looked at Adrian's leather case again. Last day? If everything goes the way it's supposed to. Anthony laughed softly. When has that ever happened? Adrian started to answer, then noticed the traffic backing up along the entrance used by courthouse staff. A delivery truck had stalled near the underground access gate. 2 government vehicles were waiting behind it. An officer in a rain jacket was waving traffic toward another street. Anthony checked his watch. 7:16. We can park in the public garage. You're a federal judge. Not until I find a parking space, apparently. Adrian shook his head. Mom would enjoy this. She'd tell me judges need exercise. They drove around the block and parked in a public garage. Anthony carried the walnut box. Adrian carried the leather case. Neither wore a suit. Anthony had dressed casually because his robe, suit, and shoes were already waiting in chambers. He wore dark slacks, a charcoal sweater, and a simple raincoat. Adrian wore faded khaki pants, brown work shoes, and a navy jacket that had seen too many airports. They looked like 2 middle-aged brothers arriving early for a hearing, which was precisely what they wanted. They crossed the wet street together. The Mercer Federal Courthouse rose above them in pale stone and glass. Anthony stopped at the bottom of the steps. For a moment, he said nothing. Adrian understood. Their father had once brought them to a courthouse when they were 16. Not a federal courthouse, a county courthouse. They had sat on a wooden bench while their father explained why public buildings mattered. A courthouse, he had told them, belonged just as much to the frightened person walking inside as it did to the powerful person sitting behind the bench. Anthony had never forgotten it. You all right? Adrian asked. Anthony nodded. Just remembering Dad. Adrian looked up toward the carved words above the entrance. Equal justice under law. Then let's make him proud. They climbed the steps. Inside, the lobby was nearly empty. The public entrance would become crowded after 8. For now, only a few attorneys, courthouse employees, maintenance workers, and people with early hearings moved through the metal detectors. Behind the security station stood 4 uniformed court security officers. Raymond Voss was drinking coffee. He was 57, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and accustomed to being recognized before he introduced himself. His uniform was immaculate. His shoes shone beneath the fluorescent lights. A row of service pins rested above his breast pocket. People usually responded to Raymond in one of 2 ways. They deferred to him, or they learned to. He noticed the Cole brothers the moment they entered. His eyes moved from Adrian's weathered leather case to Anthony's walnut box, then to their clothes. Something in his expression changed. Officer Daniel Price, standing beside him, followed his gaze. Early hearing? Daniel asked. Raymond did not answer immediately. Watch those 2. Daniel looked at the brothers. They're just coming through screening. Raymond took another sip of coffee. That's why I said watch them. Anthony placed the walnut box into a plastic tray. Adrian set down his phone, keys, wallet, and leather case. The first screening officer, a young woman named Leah Barnes, greeted them politely. Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, Anthony replied. Any electronics besides the phones? No. Any pocket knives, tools, or prohibited items? No, ma'am. Leah nodded. Go ahead through. Anthony passed the detector without incident. Adrian followed. The machine remained silent. Leah pushed their belongings through the scanner. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then she leaned toward the monitor. The leather case contained several thick document packets. Some had metal security seals. Others were bound in protective sleeves. Leah looked toward Adrian. Sir, I may need you to open the case. Adrian stepped closer. That's fine. You can inspect the interior for prohibited items. Some of the documents are sealed official material, so I'd prefer they remain closed. Leah nodded. Understood. There was nothing confrontational in the exchange. She had handled attorneys with confidential materials before. Judges, federal employees, investigators. Courthouses functioned because security and confidentiality learned to coexist. She reached toward the latch. Then Raymond Voss appeared beside her. What have we got? Documents, Leah said. He says some are sealed. Raymond looked at Adrian. Open it. Adrian did. Raymond immediately reached for the top envelope. Adrian placed 2 fingers gently on the edge. Sir, you're welcome to inspect the case itself, but that envelope should remain sealed. Raymond looked at his hand. Then at Adrian. Take your hand off it. Adrian did. I'm only explaining that the contents are protected. Protected from who? From unauthorized review. Daniel Price glanced over. Leah looked uncomfortable. Raymond gave a short laugh. And who decides who's authorized? Adrian remained courteous. The agency responsible for the material. Raymond picked up the envelope. A red strip crossed its edge. Official use. Sealed. Raymond studied the markings. What agency? I'm not at liberty to discuss that in the lobby. Raymond's expression cooled. Anthony watched from the other side of the security table. Officer, my brother isn't refusing screening. Raymond turned. I wasn't speaking to you. Anthony paused. The words themselves were not extraordinary. The tone was. Anthony had heard that tone many times in courtrooms. It came from people who believed authority became stronger when respect became smaller. He folded his hands calmly. I understand. I'm simply clarifying what he said. Raymond looked Anthony up and down. You his lawyer? No. Then let him answer. Adrian glanced at his brother. You. A small warning passed between them. Leave it alone. Not because Raymond was right, because Adrian needed to understand where the encounter was going. Leah pointed toward the scanner. Chief, the case screened clean. I can do an interior visual inspection without opening the sealed packets. Raymond did not look at her. I'll decide how we inspect it. Leah fell silent. Adrian noticed that. So did Anthony. Raymond opened another compartment. Pens, reading glasses, a yellow legal pad, a phone charger, a small notebook. Nothing unusual. He searched beneath the file folders. Nothing. Then he returned to the sealed envelope. I want this opened. Adrian answered evenly. I can't authorize that. Raymond stared at him. Can't? That's correct. Raymond smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You walked into a federal courthouse carrying something you refused to let federal security inspect. No, I consented to security screening. The bag has been scanned, and I consented to a physical inspection for prohibited items. I'm declining permission to read sealed government documents unrelated to courthouse safety. Daniel Price looked toward Raymond. The distinction was obvious. Raymond ignored it. You people always make things complicated. The lobby seemed to become quieter. Anthony's eyes lifted. Adrian did not move. Leah looked sharply at her supervisor. Raymond continued. You could have opened the envelope and been on your way. Adrian asked. You people? Raymond realized the phrase had drawn attention. He adjusted his belt. People who come in here thinking rules are optional. Anthony stepped half a pace closer. No one said the rules were optional. Raymond's eyes narrowed. You seem to have an opinion about everything. I have one about procedure. And what makes you an expert on procedure? Anthony looked at him. Years of courtrooms lived behind his silence. I've had some experience. Daniel Price almost smiled. Raymond did not. He pointed toward a bench beside the wall. Both of you sit down. Adrian glanced at the time. 7:28. We're being detained. You're being asked to wait. Are we free to leave? Raymond's jaw tightened. No. Then we're being detained. Anthony looked toward his brother. Adrian had shifted almost imperceptibly. Not frightened. Focused. Anthony knew that look. He had seen it when Adrian was 20 years old and their neighbor's house caught fire. Everyone else ran toward the noise. Adrian stopped first and counted windows. It was the mind of an investigator. Raymond pointed again. Bench. Anthony remained standing. Before we sit, can you tell us the reason? Raymond stepped closer. The reason is that I told you to. Anthony's expression did not change. That isn't a reason. Officer Daniel Price looked away. Leah Barnes stared at the floor. Raymond's face hardened. You walked into my courthouse with sealed material. Anthony answered quietly. It is not your courthouse. For the first time, Raymond looked genuinely surprised. Anthony continued. It belongs to the public. The sentence struck harder than Anthony intended. Raymond took one step forward. In this building, I decide what the law allows. Adrian looked at him carefully. Anthony did not answer for several seconds. Then he said, No, sir. You decide how to carry out your responsibilities under the law. Raymond's cheeks reddened. Sit down. The brothers sat. Raymond took the leather case behind the security desk. Adrian watched. Please keep the sealed documents in view. Raymond laughed. You giving orders now? No. I'm making a request concerning protected material. You should have thought about that before bringing it here. Adrian checked his watch again. 7:31. His scheduled meeting with Supervisory Inspector Marisol Vega was at 8:15. He had planned to arrive early, drink terrible federal building coffee, and review the final witness matrix. Now the subject at the center of the investigation was standing less than 20 feet away, holding the very complaints gathered against his unit. Adrian almost could not believe the irony, but he did not reveal it. Not yet. 9 months of work had taught him patience. More importantly, he needed to know whether Raymond's behavior was an isolated reaction to confidential documents or part of the pattern witnesses had described. Anthony leaned toward him. Do you need to make a call? Adrian shook his head slightly. Raymond heard them. No phones. Adrian looked over. I wasn't using mine. You won't. Raymond picked up both phones from the screening tray and placed them behind the security desk. Anthony stood. Those are our property. Raymond pointed at him. Sit. Anthony remained still. Under what authority are you taking our phones? Security. What security concern? Raymond walked toward him. You ask one more question like that, and I'll have you removed. Anthony studied him. He was not angry yet. Something worse had settled into him. Disappointment. All his professional life, Anthony had tried to believe institutions could be corrected because institutions were made of people, and people could choose better. Standing beneath the marble seal of the United States, he was watching a man turn procedure into personal power, one sentence at a time. Anthony sat again. A maintenance worker entering through the employee lane had stopped nearby. Her name was Rosa Alvarez. She had cleaned the courthouse for 14 years. Raymond noticed her looking. Keep moving, Rosa. She did, but slowly. At 7:36, 3 attorneys entered the lobby. One recognized Daniel Price and greeted him. As they passed, One of them looked at the Cole brothers. "Everything okay?" Raymond answered before anyone else. "Security matter." The attorney nodded and walked away. Adrian noticed something else. Daniel had still not called a supervisor. Raymond was the supervisor. There was no attempt to verify Adrian's explanation. No call to an agency security liaison. No request for identification related to the sealed material. Raymond seemed less interested in resolving the situation than winning it. That distinction mattered. Adrian asked calmly, "Chief Voss?" Raymond turned. The use of his name startled him. "You know me? Your badge identifies you." Raymond glanced down. "What? Would you contact the courthouse security coordinator or the marshal's service duty supervisor? They can verify the appropriate procedure for sealed government material." Raymond smiled. "You think I need somebody upstairs to tell me how to do my job? I think it would resolve this quickly. That's not what I asked." Adrian said nothing. Raymond walked toward the bench. "You know what I think?" Anthony looked out the front doors at the rain. Adrian waited. "I think you walked in here expecting special treatment." "No. I think you're used to talking your way around rules." "No. And I think your brother here believes using big legal words makes him important." Anthony finally turned. "What big legal words have I used?" Daniel Price coughed into his hand to hide a reaction. Raymond shot him a look. Then he faced Anthony again. "You think this is funny?" "No." "Good." Anthony's voice remained calm. "Because neither do I." The lobby doors opened. A young attorney named Nina Patel hurried inside, shaking rain from her umbrella. She passed security regularly and knew most of the officers. When she saw Anthony Cole sitting on the bench, she slowed. She had never met him personally, but she had seen the official judicial announcement. The local legal community had spent weeks discussing his confirmation. She stared for a second. Anthony noticed her. Nina's expression said recognition. Before she could speak, Raymond raised a hand. "Counselor, screening lane is over there." Nina pointed hesitantly. "Is that security matter?" She stopped. Anthony gave her a tiny shake of the head. "Not yet." Nina understood enough to remain silent. She passed through screening and entered the elevator lobby. As soon as the elevator doors closed, she pulled out her phone. Upstairs, courtroom deputy Helen Brooks was arranging files for Judge Anthony Cole's first morning. She had worked for him during part of his transition from private practice and had spent the previous week ensuring everything was perfect. At 7:43, her phone buzzed. A message from Nina Patel. Helen read it twice. "I think Judge Cole is sitting by the public entrance with security. Is something wrong?" Helen frowned. Judge Cole was supposed to be arriving soon. She called Anthony. No answer. She called again. Nothing. Then she called the security desk. Raymond answered. "Main security. This is Helen Brooks from Judge Cole's chambers." Raymond straightened slightly. "Morning. Has Judge Cole arrived?" Raymond looked directly at Anthony. He had no reason to connect the casually dressed black man on the bench to the new federal judge expected upstairs. "No, ma'am." Helen looked at the clock. "Are you sure?" "I'm standing at the front entrance." "All right. Please call me if you see him." "Will do." He hung up. Anthony had heard every word. So had Adrian. Neither spoke. Raymond noticed them looking. "What?" Anthony asked. "Was that someone looking for Judge Cole?" Raymond's tone became impatient. "That's none of your concern." Anthony nodded slowly. "You're probably right." Adrian lowered his face. For the first time that morning, he had to hide a smile. Not because the situation was funny, because Anthony had used the exact tone their father used when a person was about to discover something the hard way. At 7:47, Raymond decided to escalate. He took Adrian's wallet from the tray. Identification. Adrian said, "You already have it." Raymond opened the wallet and removed Adrian's driver's license. Adrian's federal credentials were in a concealed inner compartment of the leather case, secured behind a coded panel. His undercover work did not require disguises or false names. It required discretion. The identification Raymond held simply said Adrian Cole. Savannah, Georgia. Raymond read it. Savannah. Yes. What are you doing here? Attending to federal business. What business? I'm not required to discuss it with you. There you go again. Adrian remained silent. Raymond turned to Anthony. ID. Anthony's wallet was also behind the desk. Raymond opened it. His ordinary state license showed Anthony Cole. No title. No judicial identification. Anthony's new credentials were upstairs in chambers. Raymond compared the names. Twins? Yes, Anthony said. Raymond laughed. That explains the attitude. Anthony's eyes narrowed slightly. What attitude? The one where both of you think you're smarter than everybody in the room. Anthony looked around the lobby. No one here has said that. You don't have to. Daniel Price finally stepped closer. Chief, maybe we should call upstairs and have somebody verify the documents. Raymond turned slowly. You questioning me? No. I'm saying if they're government files, there should be a point of contact. I know how to handle government files. Daniel looked at Leah. Leah looked away. Raymond opened a side zipper on Adrian's leather case. Inside was a smaller black pouch. He pulled it out. Adrian stood immediately. Please put that down. Raymond smiled. So this matters. Yes. What's inside? Credentials and secured material. Then open it. No. Raymond's smile disappeared. Sit down. I'm asking you not to tamper with secured federal credentials. The lobby changed. Daniel Price looked sharply at Adrian. Leah raised her head. Raymond hesitated. Only for a second. Then pride won. You should have identified yourself. I told you I was here on federal business. That could mean anything. It was enough reason to contact the appropriate supervisor. Raymond pointed toward the bench. One last time. Adrian sat. Anthony whispered, How bad is this? Adrian kept his eyes on the pouch. Bad enough. Raymond carried the pouch into a small security office behind the desk. Adrian could no longer see it. That changed everything. He stood again. He stood again. Daniel Price moved toward him. Sir, I need you to document that Chief Voss has removed secured federal property from my site. Daniel blinked. Federal property? Yes. Raymond emerged from the office. His face had hardened. You're done telling my people what to document. Adrian looked directly at Daniel. Officer Price, did you hear my statement? Daniel glanced between them. Yes. Thank you. Raymond stepped close. You trying to build a case? Adrian did not answer. Raymond's eyes changed. The question had been rhetorical, but silence made him uneasy. What are you? Adrian said. At the moment, I'm a citizen asking you to follow proper procedure. Raymond reached for Adrian's arm. Anthony stood immediately. Do not put your hands on him. Raymond turned. You sit down. Anthony did not. Is he under arrest? No. Then why are you touching him? Because he refuses to follow instructions. What instruction? To sit. Anthony's voice became firmer. He stood because you removed property he identified as secured federal material. Raymond moved closer until the two men were only a few feet apart. Are you an attorney? Anthony paused. Not anymore. Raymond gave a dismissive laugh. That's what I thought. Anthony almost answered. Instead, he looked at the clock. 7:56. In 34 minutes, people upstairs would begin wondering where their new judge had gone. He sat again. Not from submission, from choice. Raymond looked satisfied. Adrian did not. He had seen that satisfaction before, in interviews, in video clips, in complaint statements. People described Raymond as a man who did not merely want compliance. He wanted acknowledgement that he controlled the room. At 8 o'clock, the public lobby began filling. A mother carrying a folder of immigration records. 2 elderly men attending a veterans benefits hearing. Several attorneys. A court reporter. A family waiting for a sentencing. Every person passed the bench where the Cole brothers sat. Some looked. Most did not. Anthony studied them. This was what his father had meant all those years ago. A courthouse was not built for judges. It was built for these people. The nervous, the hopeful, the accused, the wronged. The people who had never been inside a courtroom before and prayed they would never return. If their first encounter with justice was a person who treated dignity like a favor, the damage began before any judge took the bench. A little after 8, Rosa Alvarez passed again with a cleaning cart. This time she quietly placed 2 paper cups of water on a nearby table. Raymond noticed. "I told you to keep moving." Rosa looked at him. "They've been sitting there half an hour. They don't need anything." Anthony looked at her. "Thank you, ma'am." Rosa smiled. "You're welcome." Raymond watched her leave. Adrian's jaw tightened. He filed away the moment. Not because Rosa had offered water, because Raymond had objected to it. At 8:04, Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal Elena Ward entered through the employee entrance. She had been with the Marshal's service for 26 years. She was 51, composed, direct, and known for possessing the rare kind of authority that never needed volume. Raymond saw her and immediately walked over. "Morning, Chief Deputy." "Raymond." She handed him a folder. "We're expecting Judge Cole through the judicial entrance shortly. Make sure the lobby stays clear if his party comes through this side." Raymond nodded. "Already handled." Elena glanced toward the benches. Her eyes passed over Adrian and Anthony. She had seen photographs of the new judge, but the official portraits showed Anthony in a suit, glasses, and formal lighting. Here he wore a raincoat and charcoal sweater. She did not recognize him immediately. Anthony recognized her name badge. He said nothing. Elena continued toward the elevators. Then she stopped. Something bothered her. She turned back. Anthony was looking directly at her. There was familiarity in his face. Not personal familiarity. Recognition. Elena took 2 steps toward him. Raymond intercepted. "Minor security issue." "What issue?" "Uncooperative visitors." Adrian looked at Elena. "Chief Deputy Ward?" She turned toward him. "Yes?" "My name is Adrian Cole. Chief Voss has removed a secured federal credential pouch from my possession and taken it into the security office." Elena's expression sharpened. Raymond spoke quickly. He refused to open it for inspection. Adrian answered, "The bag itself was screened clean. I offered a visual security inspection. I advised him that sealed official materials were protected." Elena looked at Raymond. "Did you call the duty supervisor?" "I am the security supervisor." "You know what I mean." Raymond crossed his arms. "I had it under control." Elena looked at the security office. "Where is the pouch?" Raymond hesitated. "Inside." "Bring it out." His confidence shifted slightly. "Chief Deputy." "Bring it out." Daniel Price looked down. Leah exhaled quietly. Raymond returned to the office. Elena turned toward Adrian. "What agency?" Adrian looked around the crowded lobby. "I'd prefer to answer privately." She studied him. That answer made sense. "Fine." Then she looked at Anthony. "And you are?" Anthony stood. Before he could speak, the elevator doors opened. Helen Brooks stepped out at nearly a run. Behind her came the clerk of court and 2 members of Anthony's chamber's staff. Helen scanned the lobby. Her eyes landed on Anthony. Relief appeared first. Then confusion. Then alarm. "Judge Cole?" The lobby went silent. Raymond stopped halfway through the security office door. Daniel Price froze. Leah Barnes slowly turned. Elena Ward looked at Anthony. Anthony closed his eyes for the briefest moment. He had hoped the situation might be resolved without theater. It would not be. Helen approached. "Your Honor, we've been trying to reach you. Are you all right?" Anthony glanced at the phones behind the security desk. "I'm fine, Helen." Raymond stared at him. "No." The word slipped out before he could stop it. Anthony looked at him. Raymond shook his head. "You're Judge Cole?" Anthony answered without anger. "Yes." Raymond looked toward Helen, then toward Elena, then back at Anthony. "This is Judge Anthony Cole?" Helen's expression hardened. "Yes." No one spoke. The great marble lobby, designed to magnify voices, magnified silence instead. A dozen people waiting near the screening lanes had turned to watch. Raymond's face lost color. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then tried again. "Your Honor, I had no idea." Anthony looked at him. "I know. We weren't informed you'd be coming through this entrance." "I know." "If you had identified yourself." Anthony's expression changed. "Not much, but enough. That is not the issue." Raymond swallowed. "We obviously would have handled this differently." Anthony stared at him for several seconds. "That is precisely the issue." Raymond did not understand. Anthony continued. "You should not have needed my title in order to handle it differently." Somewhere behind the security line, someone quietly said, "That's right." Raymond looked toward the crowd. Elena Ward raised one hand. "Everyone continue through screening, please." Her voice was calm. People moved, but slowly. Many were still listening. Raymond turned back to Anthony. "Your Honor, I apologize." Anthony shook his head. "This is not about whether you embarrassed a judge." Raymond looked at him. "It is about what you believed you were permitted to do to two men when you thought we were ordinary visitors." The sentence settled into the room. Adrian watched his brother. He had heard Anthony speak before appellate panels and packed courtrooms. He had never sounded more like their father. Raymond seemed to realize that apology alone would not restore control. He straightened his shoulders. "With respect, Your Honor, your brother was carrying restricted material and refused inspection." Elena looked toward Adrian. "What material?" Adrian glanced at the black pouch Raymond was finally holding. "May we step into a private room?" Raymond answered first. "This is still my security matter." Elena turned toward him. "No, it stopped being yours when secured federal property became involved." Raymond stiffened. Adrian's eyes met Elena's. "Chief Deputy, I need you to contact Supervisory Inspector Marisol Vega." Elena knew the name. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough for Raymond to notice. "From OIG?" "Yes." Raymond looked from Elena to Adrian. Something cold moved through him. Elena asked, "Is she expecting you?" "At 8:15. The lobby clock read 8:12. Elena took out her phone. Raymond stepped forward. "Wait." No one looked at him. Elena dialed. "Marisol, Elena Ward. I have a man here named Adrian Cole." She listened. Her eyes moved slowly toward Adrian. Then toward Raymond. "Yes." Another pause. "Yes, he's here." She listened longer. Then her jaw tightened. "I understand." She ended the call. Raymond spoke first. "What did she say?" Elena did not answer him. She walked toward Adrian. "Mr. Cole, I apologize for the delay. Inspector Vega confirms your identity and requests that your materials be preserved exactly as they are." Adrian nodded. "Thank you." Raymond stared. "Identity as what?" Adrian looked at him. The moment had arrived. He did not enjoy it. There was no satisfaction in his face. "Only weariness." Senior Special Agent Adrian Cole, Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General. The words seemed to change the temperature in the lobby. Daniel Price slowly looked toward Raymond. Leah Barnes covered her mouth for a second. Helen Brooks looked from Adrian to Anthony. Even Anthony, who knew his brother's general role but not the details, became still. Raymond's eyes dropped toward the black pouch in his hand. Adrian continued. You asked what was inside. Raymond did not respond. My credentials. Raymond stared at the pouch, as though it had become too heavy to hold. And the sealed documents? Adrian looked at him. Complaints. Raymond swallowed. What complaints? Adrian's voice remained level. Complaints concerning courthouse security conduct. No one moved. Raymond's face tightened. This courthouse? Adrian said nothing for a moment. Then, yes. Daniel Price took one step backward. Raymond looked around the lobby. Against who? Adrian's answer was quiet. Your unit. Raymond's breathing changed. He looked at the leather case, then at the closed security office, then at Adrian. Against me? Adrian did not need to dramatize the moment. Yes, the silence that followed was deeper than the first. Raymond slowly placed the pouch on the counter. No one laughed. No one whispered. Anthony watched his brother with new understanding. He had known Adrian was involved in an integrity investigation. He had deliberately never asked where. Now the morning made terrible sense. Anthony looked at Raymond. Raymond looked older than he had 40 minutes earlier. For the first time, he was not controlling the room. Elena Ward stepped beside Adrian. We need to secure the security office. Raymond's head lifted. Excuse me? We need to preserve all recordings and materials associated with this incident. You're treating me like a suspect. I'm preserving evidence. Raymond glanced toward his officers. I didn't do anything except security screening, Adrian responded. That determination will not be made in this lobby. Raymond pointed toward the leather case. He refused inspection. Adrian nodded. And there are cameras recording the entire interaction. Raymond's eyes lifted toward the ceiling. For the first time that morning, he seemed to notice them. There were 4 cameras covering the public entrance. 2 over the metal detectors. 1 above the waiting benches. Another pointed directly toward the security desk. Every word might not have been recorded. Every movement had been. Elena turned to Daniel. Officer Price, do not touch the video system. Daniel nodded immediately. Yes, ma'am. Officer Barnes, secure the screening station log. Yes, ma'am. Raymond looked at both of them. You take orders from me. Neither answered. Elena faced him. For the moment, they take preservation instructions from the Marshal's service. Raymond's face reddened. This is ridiculous. Anthony stepped aside. He no longer wanted to be part of the confrontation. Helen approached him. Your Honor, we should get you upstairs. Anthony looked at Adrian. You okay? Adrian smiled faintly. I've had better mornings. So have I. Anthony started toward the elevators, then stopped. He turned back to Raymond. I want something understood. Raymond looked at him. I will have no role in any investigation or proceeding arising from what happened here today. Helen glanced at him. Anthony continued. I was involved. I am a witness. If any matter related to this reaches the court, it will be assigned elsewhere. Adrian nodded almost imperceptibly. That was exactly the right thing to say. Raymond seemed confused. Perhaps he had expected revenge. A judge embarrassed in his own courthouse now had enormous symbolic power. Anthony refused to use it. Why? Raymond asked before he could stop himself. Anthony looked at him. Because justice cannot depend on how angry I am. Then he entered the elevator. The doors closed. For several seconds, no one in the lobby spoke. Upstairs, Anthony stood silently as the elevator rose. Helen beside him was furious. I cannot believe this happened. Anthony stared at the floor numbers. Believe it. They detained you. Yes. They took your phone. Yes. And your brother? He handled it better than I did. Helen shook her head. We need to file something immediately. Anthony looked at her. No. She blinked. No? My brother will handle his responsibilities. The Marshal's service will handle theirs. I will handle mine. And yours is? Anthony looked toward the doors. To take the bench at 9. Helen stared at him. The chief judge has a whole ceremony planned. Photographs, remarks. We can move it to this afternoon, or tomorrow. Cancel it. Your Honor, there is a small business owner on my 9 o'clock calendar who took a day off work to be here. Helen hesitated. You still want to proceed? Especially now. The elevator opened. His chamber's staff was waiting. Someone had already placed his robe over a chair. His dark suit hung beside it. The walnut box containing his father's cufflinks was still downstairs. Anthony suddenly remembered. He almost laughed. Of all the things that had happened, that was the one that hurt. He had wanted his father with him. A few minutes later, there was a knock. Rosa Alvarez stood outside chambers holding the walnut box. Helen looked surprised. I found it in the screening tray, Rosa said. I thought Judge Cole might want it. Anthony walked toward her. You brought this up? Yes, sir. He opened the box. The old cufflinks rested inside. For the first time that morning, his composure cracked. Only slightly. Thank you, Rosa smiled. My father used to say, you can tell what a thing means by how carefully somebody carries it. Anthony looked at her. Your father was a wise man. So was yours, I'm guessing. Anthony smiled. Yes, ma'am. At 8:48, Anthony Cole buttoned a white shirt and fastened his father's scratched cufflinks. At 8:57, he put on the black robe. At 9, courtroom 2 stood as he entered. No one inside knew what had happened downstairs. Not yet. The clerk announced the court. Anthony took his seat. For one brief second, he looked at the people before him. Attorneys, defendants, families, court staff, citizens, people who did not know he had spent nearly an hour sitting on a lobby bench because another man had decided dignity had to be earned. Anthony placed his hands on the bench. Good morning. His voice was steady. The first case involved a small business owner challenging an administrative penalty. Nothing dramatic. No national issue. No television cameras. But Anthony listened as though the matter were the most important case in America, because to the man standing before him, it was. Downstairs, the courthouse had changed. Inspector Marisol Vega arrived at 9:12 with 2 investigators. She was 48, compact, sharp-eyed, and had worked with Adrian for 6 years. The moment she saw him, she stopped. You missed the meeting. Adrian gave her a tired smile. I got delayed. She looked toward Raymond Voss. I heard. Raymond sat in a conference room with Elena Ward. He had been temporarily relieved of his supervisory duties while the morning incident was reviewed. No handcuffs. No public spectacle. No raised voices. Adrian had specifically asked that there be none. Accountability did not require humiliation. Marisol inspected Adrian's leather case. The seals on the complaint packets remained intact. The black credential pouch showed scratches near the clasp where Raymond had attempted to open it. Marisol photographed everything. Then she closed her notebook and looked at him. Before you tell me what happened, tell me something else. Adrian waited. You had credentials in your hand the whole time. Yes. You could have ended it in 10 seconds. Yes. Marisol did not raise her voice. Then explain to me why I am not sitting across from an agent who let a subject of his own investigation dig a hole for 40 minutes. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Because I don't have a good answer. Try. The first 10 minutes, I was a citizen who thought this would resolve itself. By the time it didn't, I was a witness. And somewhere in there, I stopped being sure which one I was. Marisol wrote that down. His representative will say you baited him. He'll be entitled to say it. Will he be right? Adrian looked at the sealed packets on the table. I've asked myself that since 8 o'clock. Marisol closed the file. Then you'll answer it under oath, not to me. She was not unkind about it. She was simply correct. You're a witness now, not an investigator. You're off the courthouse portion of this case as of this minute. Adrian nodded. He had known it before she said it. 9 months of work, and the last piece of it would be finished by someone else. Then she asked him what happened. He told her. Only facts. No adjectives. No speculation. At 10:30, Daniel Price gave his statement. He admitted he had believed Raymond was escalating unnecessarily. Why didn't you intervene? Marisol asked. Daniel stared at the table. Because he was my boss. Marisol waited. Daniel looked ashamed. I know how that sounds. How does it sound to you? Like I thought following him mattered more than stopping something I knew was wrong. Marisol wrote nothing for a moment. Then she said, Thank you for answering honestly. Leah Barnes was next. She explained that the case had screened clean. She had intended to complete a visual inspection. Raymond had taken over. Had you handled sealed legal or government materials before? Yes. How? We inspect for security threats without reading privileged contents, unless there's a specific reason. Was there a specific reason here? No. Why didn't you say that? I did once. Then, Leah looked toward the closed door. He shut me down. Marisol nodded. Was that unusual? Leah did not answer immediately. That pause mattered. No. By noon, the morning incident was no longer an isolated event. It was a doorway. The investigators reopened 14 complaints from the previous 18 months. Then 23. Then 31. Not every complaint was valid. Some showed officers acting appropriately under difficult circumstances. Adrian had insisted from the beginning that those be separated from the others. A serious investigation did not begin with the assumption that every accusation was true. It began with the assumption that every accusation deserved honest examination. But several cases shared troubling similarities. People were detained after asking why a search was necessary. Visitors were described as aggressive on written reports, even when video showed them speaking calmly. 3 individuals had been removed from the courthouse after questioning whether officers could inspect confidential documents. 2 attorneys had filed complaints about privileged files being opened. An elderly black veteran had been held in a side room for 45 minutes after objecting to an officer making comments about his worn clothing. A white construction worker had experienced nearly the same treatment 3 weeks later after entering with a tool bag and questioning why his personal papers were being read. The pattern was broader than race alone. Bias played a role in some encounters. Class did in others. Age, appearance, accent. But one principle linked them. Raymond Voss appeared to treat questions as challenges. Challenges became disobedience. Disobedience became justification for more control. And because most people wanted only to attend a hearing and go home, few pushed complaints far enough to be heard. At 2:15, Marisol Vega sat across from Raymond Voss. Adrian was not in the room. He would not be in any room where Voss was questioned again. Raymond had requested a representative. One was present. The interview was professional. Marisol began. Chief Voss, when the case passed the scanner, was any prohibited item detected? No. Did Mr. Cole refuse a physical inspection of the case? He placed restrictions on it. That was not my question. Raymond looked at her. No. Did he refuse to identify himself by name? No. Did he offer to have an appropriate federal supervisor verify the sealed material? Raymond hesitated. Yes. Why did you decline? Because I believed I could handle the situation. Marisol nodded. When you took their phones, what security threat did they present? Raymond shifted in his chair. They were being detained. For what? Failure to comply with security instructions. What instruction had he failed to follow before the detention began? Raymond looked toward his representative. The man remained silent. Raymond answered. He would not open the sealed documents. Marisol leaned back. Was opening those documents required for security screening? I believed it was. Based on what policy? Raymond did not answer. Marisol placed a printed policy on the table. Is this the screening protocol in effect that morning? Raymond looked at it. Yes. Please show me where it authorizes reading sealed legal documents after a bag has cleared explosive and prohibited item screening. Silence. Raymond's jaw worked. Finally, he said, Officer discretion. Where is that written? Not every situation is written. That's true. Marisol's voice remained calm. But discretion is not the same thing as unlimited authority. Raymond's eyes lifted. You told Judge Cole, in this building, I decide what the law allows. Raymond's face tightened. I don't recall saying that. Marisol turned a page. 2 officers and a maintenance employee recall it. So does an attorney standing 8 feet away. Raymond looked down. For the first time, the words he had used that morning seemed to return to him. Marisol did not press harder. She did not need to. The truth was heavy enough without decoration. Weeks passed. The review expanded. News of the incident eventually became public, though Anthony refused interviews. Commentators wanted the obvious story. Federal judge mistreated in his own courthouse. Investigator reveals badge. Security chief exposed. Anthony wanted no part of that framing. When asked by a reporter outside another event, he gave only one answer. The important question is not whether someone knew I was a judge. The important question is how a person should be treated when no title protects them. Then he walked away. That sentence traveled farther than any angry speech could have. Letters began arriving at the courthouse. Some supported the officers. Some condemned them. Some came from people sharing experiences of their own. One letter was from an 81-year-old retired nurse named Evelyn Carter. She wrote that 3 years earlier she had come to the Mercer courthouse to support her grandson. She had been confused about which line to enter. A security officer became impatient. When she asked him to slow down because she could not hear clearly, he accused her of refusing instructions. She had cried in the restroom afterward. She never complained. Her final sentence stayed with Anthony. I thought maybe I was too old to understand how things worked now. Anthony read that line twice. Then a third time. He placed the letter in his desk. Not as evidence, as a reminder. 2 months after the incident, the Inspector General Task Force issued preliminary findings. The investigation did not claim every member of the courthouse security unit had acted improperly. Many had served professionally for years. Several had quietly objected to Raymond's methods. But leadership failures had allowed poor habits to become normal. Complaints had been reviewed informally instead of independently. Supervisors had too much discretion to close matters involving their own personnel. Training emphasized control more than communication. The findings were not entirely comfortable for the government either. One paragraph noted that a senior agent had remained in a developing incident longer than necessary while carrying credentials that would have ended it. Adrian read that paragraph several times. He did not contest it. The courthouse adopted immediate reforms. Complaints would be reviewed outside the immediate chain of command. Security officers would receive additional instruction on confidential legal material, de-escalation, disability awareness, and constitutional limits. Body-worn audio systems were added to key posts. Visitors would receive clear written explanations of screening requirements. Officers were reminded that asking a question was not, by itself, refusal to comply. Raymond Voss remained on administrative leave while the investigation continued. Daniel Price was not fired. Neither was Leah Barnes. Both received remedial training. Both later became part of an internal group tasked with rebuilding security culture. Daniel struggled with that decision at first. He told Adrian privately, "I should have done more." Adrian answered, "So should I. Do more next time." Daniel never forgot it. Rosa Alvarez became an unexpected voice in the reform process. During a staff listening session, a senior administrator asked what courthouse employees needed most. People offered complicated answers. More staffing, better equipment, clearer policies. Rosa raised her hand. Permission to be kind. The room became quiet. The administrator asked what she meant. Rosa said, "Sometimes people know something is wrong, but they are afraid kindness will look like disobedience. If somebody is confused, help them. If somebody is scared, explain. If an old woman needs a chair, give her a chair. Nobody should worry they'll get in trouble for treating a person like a person." Anthony heard about the comment later. He asked that Rosa be invited to a courthouse employee recognition luncheon. She refused an award. "I just clean the floors." Anthony smiled. "My father used to say the person cleaning the floor knows more about a building than the person whose name is on the office." Rosa laughed. "I would have liked your father. He would have liked you." 3 months after the incident, Anthony received notice that a legal proceeding connected to the investigation might be filed in federal court. He immediately submitted his recusal. No hesitation. No private request to influence assignment. No suggestion about outcome. Another judge from a different district was designated to handle every matter arising from the investigation. Anthony explained his decision to one of his clerks. "I cannot ask people to trust a system if I bend it when I'm the one who was hurt." The clerk asked, "Even if you know you could be fair?" Anthony looked at her. "Fairness is not only what I believe about myself, people must be able to trust the process." The eventual proceedings were quieter than television audiences expected. There was no dramatic moment where Raymond Voss was dragged from the courthouse. No revenge. No crowd cheering. Real accountability usually moved through documents, testimony, hearings, administrative findings, and carefully written decisions. Raymond's representative argued that a federal agent had deliberately allowed the encounter to escalate. The argument was taken seriously. It cost the government 2 of its stronger allegations. It did not explain the other 30. Some allegations were substantiated. Others were not. Raymond was found to have repeatedly exceeded policy, failed to document detentions accurately, and created a supervisory culture in which employees feared questioning his decisions. He lost his leadership position. After further proceedings, his courthouse security service ended. Other personnel faced discipline based on their individual conduct. No one was punished merely because Anthony Cole was a judge. That point mattered deeply to both brothers. One Sunday evening, months later, Adrian drove to Anthony's house outside Atlanta. It was the first quiet weekend they had shared since the incident. Anthony was in the kitchen attempting to reproduce their mother's cornbread. The result looked suspicious. Adrian stared at the pan. "What happened?" Anthony frowned. "It's cornbread." "That wasn't my question." Anthony laughed. "You investigate everything. Some things require investigation." They carried dinner onto the back porch. The evening was warm. Cicadas hummed in the trees. For a while, they spoke about ordinary things. Football, their cousin's retirement, a leaking gutter, the outrageous cost of replacing a refrigerator. Eventually, Anthony became quiet. "You know what bothers me most?" Adrian waited. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if Helen hadn't come downstairs." Adrian looked toward the yard. "We would have figured it out." "That isn't what I mean." Anthony set down his glass. What if I had been exactly who Raymond thought I was? Adrian turned toward him. Just a man coming to court. Anthony nodded. No chamber staff looking for me, no judge title, no one upstairs wondering why I was late. Adrian understood. That question had haunted the investigation too. Anthony continued. Would anyone have believed us afterward? Maybe. That isn't good enough. No. Anthony stared into the twilight. All those years, I thought the power of the law was that eventually facts could be heard. Adrian said, they can. Eventually. Yes. Anthony looked at him. But dignity is usually needed before eventually. Adrian smiled sadly. That sounds like Dad. I know. They sat in silence. The following Monday, Anthony entered the Mercer courthouse through the public doors. He had begun doing it occasionally. His security detail disliked the habit. He understood their concerns and followed every reasonable precaution. But whenever circumstances allowed, he wanted to see the courthouse from the same side of the screening table as everyone else. The lobby looked different now. Not radically. There were still metal detectors, still trays, still officers asking people to remove belts and empty pockets. Security still mattered. Rules still mattered. Courthouses could not function without both. But beside the screening lanes stood a new sign written in plain language. Screening is required for everyone. Questions are welcome. Please ask if you need assistance. Anthony stopped in front of it. Daniel Price was working the lane. He saw Anthony. Good morning, Your Honor. Anthony placed his wallet and keys in a tray. Good morning, Officer Price. Daniel smiled awkwardly. You know you can use the employee entrance. I know. Anthony walked through the detector. No alarm. Daniel handed back his belongings. Have a good day, sir. You too. Anthony started toward the elevators. Near the far wall, another small plaque had been installed. It had been proposed by courthouse employees, not by Anthony. He had objected when they first showed him the wording. He thought it sounded too grand. Rosa told him to stop complaining. The plaque read, "Dignity is not a privilege granted by authority. It belongs to every person who enters these doors." Anthony stood before it for a long moment. Visitors walked around him. A young lawyer hurried past carrying 3 binders. An elderly couple studied a directory. A father held his teenage son's shoulder. A woman in a nurse's uniform asked an officer where to find courtroom 4. The officer smiled and pointed toward the elevators. Nobody recognized Anthony. No one whispered that a federal judge was standing beside them. No cameras appeared, and that was exactly why the moment mattered. Anthony looked up toward the carved words high above the lobby entrance. Equal justice under law. He had seen those words thousands of times. But standing there that morning, he understood again what his father had tried to teach 2 16-year-old boys decades earlier. Those words were not a description of something America had already perfected. They were a promise each generation had to keep. Anthony entered the elevator. Just before the doors closed, he saw Adrian walking through the courthouse entrance. His brother carried the same worn leather case. Anthony stepped forward and held the elevator. Adrian crossed the lobby. Daniel Price screened his case according to the new procedure. No unnecessary questions. No confrontation. No special treatment. Just professionalism. Adrian joined Anthony inside the elevator. "You're holding elevators for people now?" he asked. Anthony pressed the button for the 5th floor. "Only investigators who look suspicious." Adrian laughed. The doors closed. For several floors, they said nothing. Then Adrian looked at the old cufflinks on his brother's sleeves. "You still wearing those?" "Every Monday." "Why Monday?" Anthony thought about it. "Because Monday is when people need reminders." Adrian smiled. The elevator reached the 5th floor. Before the doors opened, Anthony asked, Do you ever think about that morning? Sometimes. What part? Adrian considered the question. Not the reveal. Not Raymond's face when he learned Anthony was a judge. Not the moment Adrian's own credentials came out. Those were the pieces people liked to retell. But they were not the part Adrian remembered most. I remember Rosa bringing us water. Anthony looked at him. Me too. She didn't know who we were. No. She just thought two people had been sitting too long. Anthony smiled. The doors opened. That may have been the most important thing anybody did all morning. They stepped into the corridor together. One brother turned toward the investigative offices, the other toward his courtroom. Different duties, different kinds of authority, the same lesson. That afternoon, Anthony finished his docket shortly after 4. The courtroom emptied. His clerk gathered the files. Anthony remained behind for a minute. Sunlight came through the tall windows and stretched across the empty benches. He imagined his father sitting in the back row, not wearing a suit, not saying anything, just watching. Anthony reached beneath his robe and touched one scratched cufflink. There had been a time in his life when he believed becoming a judge would be the highest proof of everything his parents had sacrificed. Now he understood the title itself proved very little. A robe could give a person authority. It could not give him wisdom. A badge could give someone responsibility. It could not give him integrity. Those things had to be earned somewhere. No institution could grant them. Inside a person's choices, especially the choices made when he believed no consequences were coming. Anthony rose from the bench. He turned off the small lamp beside his chair. Then he walked down the steps and left the courtroom the same way everyone else did. Through the door, into the hallway, toward a world full of people whose names he would never know.